Disclaimer. I am not a doctor, and neither is Hermione. I claim unreliable narrator on any mistakes. Oh, and J.K. Rowling owns all. George pulled Hermione away from the sitting room and helped her pull off the basilisk skin coat she had hastily put back on during their escape. It had been torn at some point during the process, despite the leather's toughness. Maybe Bellatrix's knife, or her own carbon dagger just to spite her, or maybe one of Rookwood's curses finally cut through the magic resistance. The hem, and especially the left sleeve, were ragged. It would still provide some protection, but it wouldn't be as good as when she got it. "How do you feel?" George asked. "I'll live," she rasped, notwithstanding that she sounded like an old woman who'd smoked for 50 years. In fact, she was still in some of the worst pain she'd ever felt outside the torture curse itself. It was like she'd been sunburned all over, and her whole body was aching like she'd overexerted herself exercising. And, worst of all, her mind was still fuzzy. She started running through maths in her head, trying to assess the damage. Multiplication was still there, and not just the multiplication tables, but it was slower. Division, same. Algebra, it was there. Trigonometry? "Hermione, you're bleeding!" She snapped out of it with George's shout. She looked down at her left arm and saw the letters written in oozing blood. Mudblood. "That bitch! Why didn't you say anything?" "I was a little preoccupied," she managed. "What happened now?" Arthur cut in. He was levitating a tub of water into the sitting room and carrying old sheets and pillows. For labor and delivery. What was this, the Dark Ages? "Cruciatus curse wasn't working, so Bellatrix started cutting her up," George snarled. "I'm gonna kill her, Just look!" "Merlin's beard!" Arthur gasped when he saw the word. Hermione shook her head, and the room spun. "Not important." "But she carved George started. "Not important!" "Hermione, that needs looked at," Arthur insisted. "See to bill and floor," she snapped. Her voice was slowly coming back to her. "I learnt Snape's healing spell. It should do the trick." She drew her wand and ran it over the wound. "Vulnera sanenta." The wounds didn't close. "What?" she squeaked. "Vulnera sanenta. Why isn't this working? Vulnera sanenta." "Hermione, this is Bellatrix we're talking about," George said. "It's probably cursed." He pulled her along back to the sitting room. "This spell is designed for cursed wounds," she cried, then descended into a coughing fit. Molly noticed their distress. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Hermione got cut by a cursed knife," George said. "Oh dear, let me see." Molly took her hand and also gasped when she saw the word. "Oh no, how awful! I'm so sorry, Hermione." Hermione hissed and pulled her hand back. "Don't worry about the damned word. That healing spell should have worked on it." Arthur shook his head. "Not necessarily on a wound caused by a physical knife," he said. "Those curses can be stronger. Muriel, do you have any essence of dittany?"
"Essence of dittany?" Muriel's voice creaked. "Do you know how expensive that is, young man? And I haven't exactly had the chance to buy any since we started hiding."
The rest of the Weasleys ignored her little jab. "Hermione, I don't suppose you have your own?" Arthur asked.
"No," she said. "I did, but I lost it in the fight, along with our last 2 brooms, and my survival gear, and all my textbooks and muggle books."
Ginny whirled around and stared at her in horror.
"What about the important stuff?" she asked. "Your secret project?"
She shook her head.
"I took all that out before we left. Harry has it."
"That's one bit of good news," George said. "Hermione, you should lie down." She suppressed a hiss when he touched her, still hypersensitive.
"Just put me in a chair."
She fought weakly against his efforts to take her to her bed and sat in an overstuffed chair.
"Ginny, look after Fleur for a few minutes," Molly said. "Hermione, I'll see if I can come up with something." "No." "What?" Triage, Molly, Hermione said. You can't do much for curse damage, and Fleur and Bill need help more. Just get me a pain potion.
She stopped and looked at Fleur, whom Ginny was helping lie down on the blankets.
If you can spare any. But I've got it.
She bit down on her collar and ran her wand over her wounds again.
Fascio Sutra.
The pain wasn't as bad as she'd expected, as the wounds were stitched closed with conjured thread, what with how badly she was hurting already.
Tergeo, Ferula.
The wound was cleaned and bandaged. It would hold for now. That's going to scar, George said.
Let it, she growled. It doesn't matter. I'll show them what a mudblood can do.
Don't call... He stopped and sighed. You've still been cruciated. Badly. You need... Hell, I don't even know what to do for that. Are pain potions enough?
It's not like it'll get worse. Need to call Harry.
Hermione, you need to rest.
I need to bring Harry and your brother here, George.
She waved her wand again, closing her eyes and concentrating.
Expecto Nuntium.
Nothing happened. Hermione, George said, but she ignored him. This wasn't a good sign. She still practiced religiously with the Patronus charm. She focused harder, trying to piece her occlumency back together to fight the pain and concentrate on her happiest memories.
Expecto Nuntium.
It worked. Her silvery otter appeared from her wand, wavery, but clear and primed to carry a message.
Harry, we're at Muriel's. Everyone got out but Bill's hurt, and Fleur's having the baby. Get Fred and come here. Wait, buy some pain meds from the chemist first. And bring the diadem, too.
She sent her Patronus away to Nottingham, then slumped in the chair. Muggle pain meds? George said in confusion.
Better than nothing, she said. Don't know how much we have here.
You didn't tell him why you needed them? She shrugged and waved him off. Arthur stood over the scene, surveying the room, and Hermione followed his gaze. Everyone seemed to be in their places. Ron was the only one who didn't really have anything to do.
Percy, how's Bill?
Arthur asked. Percy looked up and wobbled his hand noncommittally.
Not great. Broken leg, broken ribs, minor curse damage, possible concussion. I'm not really the one to be dealing with this kind of thing. Bill, let me take a look at that, dear, Molly said.
No, Bill said.
Bill?
Mom, see to Fleur. I can wait, Bill said, pushing himself up on the sofa.
Bill, lie down. You're no condition for this.
I need to be with my wife, he grunted. He reached out to Fleur on the floor beside him. Fleur took his hand, but she looked up at him sternly.
You are sweet, Bill, but you need to see for...
She stopped as another bird-like screech tore from her, which proceeded into swearing colorfully in French.
Yeah!
Bill yelled as Fleur clamped down on his hand, hard enough to hear his joints crack.
Oh, Merlin! Molly exclaimed. Ginny, how many minutes was that?
Ginny looked at her mother with wide eyes.
I don't know, 4 or 5? Oh, Lord help us, Molly murmured.
She sprang into action to help Fleur again.
I'm sorry, Fleur, but I'm with Bill now. Arthur, get ready. At this rate, this baby could be here by sunup.
Bill whined and clutched his wrist when Fleur finally released him. He was bleeding from 5 small claw marks, and Hermione could see the subtle pattern of feathers rippling over his wife's skin. That was another bad sign. Full vela births had to be terrifying affairs. Arthur got out more supplies, presumably to help finish the delivery cleanly and to make sure the baby was taken care of. Muriel came back a few minutes later with some potions.
This is all I have in the potions cabinet, she said. Pain potion, blood replenisher, scale of grow, concussion potion, and you'd best hope it's enough.
Thank you, Muriel, Arthur said. Percy, give this to Bill. He handed out one of the potions.
Hermione should have a dose of the pain reliever, Molly said. Molly, I couldn't, Hermione said.
Yes, you bloody well can, George insisted.
But Fleur,
Molly cut her off.
You went through worse than she is not an hour ago, and that's saying something. And I doubt Fleur will need the whole bottle at this rate. Just Just see to yourself right now."
Hermione graciously accepted the small cup of potion after that, and drank it. She coughed as it hit the scratching in her throat, but she got it down. The potion only took the edge off, though she didn't really expect anything more. Not against that curse, but she could function a little better. Molly gave Fleur a dose next, but she was still in this for the long haul. Molly did find a couple minutes to mend Bill's broken bones, but she said it wasn't a perfect job. Bill slid down to the floor to sit by Fleur's side. A little while later, a clang sounded throughout the house, signifying someone crossing the wards.
"Arthur! Ronald!"
Molly barked and pointed to the door. The two men ran out and thankfully ran back in a couple minutes later without incident.
"It's Harry and Fred, Mum,"
Ron called, and sure enough, the two harried-looking boys stumbled in after him.
"George!" Fred called. He ran over and hugged his twin. "Are you okay? All we heard was Bill was hurt." "Just a little bruised, Freddie," George said. "Bill is—" He motioned to his eldest brother, who was still sitting wearily by Fleur's side. His hand was wrapped in a strip of cloth while he held hers. "Oh, Merlin!"
Fred averted his eyes from Fleur. George rolled his eyes. "Oh, grow up, Fred. Bill's not great, but he's okay. Hermione, though—" "Yeah, Hermione, what happened?" Harry said as he took off his coat. "You sounded like you were choking or something."
"Did you get the pills?" she demanded.
"Yeah, got both kinds, just in case. Do you know how hard it is to find a 24-hour chemist?"
"Sorry, Harry. George, water, please."
George hurried to get her a glass of water, and Hermione struggled to open the bottles with trembling hands and downed 2 paracetamol and 2 ibuprofen on the spot. "Bloody hell, what happened to you?" Harry demanded.
"Cruciatus. Bellatrix."
Harry and Fred both sucked in a breath. "Ouch. Sorry," Harry said.
"It was bad," George said. "I only heard it, and I won't be able to sleep tonight. Plus her arm."
"Her arm?"
"Just a scratch. Don't worry about it." She made a fist and winced. "Ow!"
"What?" asked George.
"I think I might have sprained it."
"What? Why didn't you say anything?"
"I didn't notice. I was hurting too much everywhere else. I'm not worried about my body. Harry, did you bring the diadem?"
Harry nodded. He produced a bundle of cloth and unwrapped it to reveal Ravenclaw's diadem. He handed it to Hermione, eyeing her worriedly, and she held it up to put it on her head. "Wait, what are you doing?" George grabbed her good wrist. Hermione opened her mouth and struggled to voice her fears.
"George, the words don't exist to describe what happened back there, and my head still feels fuzzy. If there's any permanent damage, this is the only thing I can think of that might mitigate it."
"What? Are you sure that's a good idea?"
"No, but it's the best one I've got right now."
She put the diadem on her head and squeezed her eyes shut against the world. Ravenclaw's diadem opened the connections between the conscious and subconscious mind, including the ones that governed the brain's natural capacity for maths. Perhaps, as she wore it, it would reinforce those pathways and repair whatever the damage the Cruciatus curse might have caused. Or maybe it would reinforce the perceptive pathways and send her into permanent sensory overload. Or maybe it was specifically magically prevented from doing either. She didn't know what, if anything, it had done to Rowena Ravenclaw with long-term use. But if she could just solve Harry's Horcrux problem, it would be worth it. So she was pretty sure she was better off wearing it than not. She moaned softly from the sensations. A minute later, Fleur screamed again, and Molly shouted, and Hermione squeaked and covered her ears. George touched her on the shoulder, and she shrugged him off. "Hermione, that thing makes you hypersensitive. Isn't it making the pain worse?"
"No, it doesn't make me hypersensitive," she said. "It makes me feel everything. I was already feeling the pain, but now I can distract myself with the rest of it. I'm getting better at doing that. Besides, it doesn't stop the pain relievers working."
Under the circumstances, itchy clothing was practically welcome, given the alternative. But it was too loud out here. She stood up. "Hermione," George started.
"I need a minute."
She stumbled back to Ginny's room and shut the door. With the lights out and the sounds from the sitting room muffled, she could focus. She still hurt all over, and she was dead tired, but she could function now. She focused on her maths. Arithmetic was faster than without the diadem. She ran through the more advanced subjects, year by year, class by class: elementary algebra, Euclidean geometry, trigonometry, differential, integral, and vector calculus, ordinary and partial differential equations, non-Euclidean geometry, linear and abstract algebra, real and complex analysis, algebraic topology, and differential geometry. She remembered everything. She could do the requisite operations in her head. She didn't have any tests to calibrate her speed and accuracy, but it seemed that Bellatrix hadn't done enough damage to slow her down. Hermione sank to the floor in relief and leaned against the door. Now that she was calmer, she thought back and assessed the situation. What was the difference between her and Septima, or Neville's parents? She was younger, of course, and she'd probably been exposed for less time. That seemed like the most important part. Plus, Septima had suffered a concussion on top of it. But how did the Cruciatus Curse actually cause damage to the brain? She'd never heard of a muggle going insane or comatose from torture. From injuries associated with torture, certainly, but not from pain alone. From how the Cruciatus Curse worked, she could hazard a guess that the damage was electrical, simply dumping more energy into the nervous system than it could handle. That suggested the damage was simply burning out the nerves on the cellular level. For a curse that focused on the pain nerves, which didn't exist in the brain itself, that meant it would take longer for the damage to seep into the brain. That was good for her, but it made what happened to the Longbottoms all the more horrifying. To put someone into a vegetative state with the Cruciatus Curse, the Death Eaters must have tortured them long past the point where they could actually feel pain, or their bodies were capable of responding. Or maybe multiple curses at once did multiple damage, which was an even scarier thought, and meant the Death Eaters didn't know how to use it properly. She forced the thought from her mind and turned to the other strange occurrence: accidental magic. She was younger than the Longbottoms. That was the simplest explanation she could think of. They were R's, and good ones, so she couldn't imagine she was more skilled at the actual casting of magic than they were. Maybe they hadn't had a long enough respite from the curse, but that seemed unlikely. Maybe it was the multiple curses again. But regardless, summoning her wand without a wand? That was so useful, she should have learnt it ages ago. She stood up and proceeded back to the sitting room. She ignored the boys, even though their words intruded like clanging cymbals. She placed her wand on the side table and sat back in the overstuffed chair out of reach. Then she reached out to it and tried to call it to her. Hermione, what are you doing? Harry said.
Using the Force.
Huh? Hermione looked up.
Have you ever seen Return of the Jedi?
Harry gave her an annoyed look. Yeah, in bits and pieces anyway. The Dursleys couldn't stop me every time.
Well, you know at the end when the Emperor used lightning on Luke?
Yeah. Wait, what's this now? George cut in.
Muggle thing. George, you didn't see what happened. After Bellatrix carved up my arm...
What? Harry yelled. Hermione flinched back.
Not so loud. Stay with me, Harry. I unstuck my wrist from the floor, zapped Bellatrix with lightning like in Star Wars, and summoned my wand to myself. All without a wand. That's when I cast Atithecula on the trapdoor.
Everyone who heard her stopped and stared at her. You mean you did wandless magic? Fred said in awe. That's incredible. That's like Dumbledore-level stuff.
I think it was more like directed accidental magic, Hermione said. But if I did it once, I'm hoping I can learn it so I don't ever have to go through that again.
She fell silent and concentrated again, reaching out towards her wand. Her hand was still shaking. Her wand didn't budge. Maybe you should wait until you're rested and healed, George offered. She shrugged it off.
It can't be that hard, she muttered.
She tried to reach for the flow of magic that she'd felt when she'd zapped Bellatrix, something they never learnt in school beyond the cursory level they needed to wave a wand. It didn't sound that hard in principle, but doing it without a wand was like writing with a chisel instead of a quill pen. She started to feel it, though. She reached out. Her wand started to wobble. Aye! The scream from Fleur broke her concentration. Her wand sparked and knocked itself onto the floor. She snatched it up and spun to where the other woman and Bill were sitting.
That's it, Fleur. Breathe. Breathe, Molly said. Contas, je vas trach le foyer la bofa. Of course, dear, Molly said cheerfully. Don't worry, you're already most of the way there. Most of the way, mon cool.
Fleur grabbed for her wand, and Bill and Ginny both dove to stop her.
Whoa, whoa, easy there, Fleur, Bill said. Don't go hexing the midwife.
Fleur took a deep breath and leaned back on the blankets.
Don't think you are off the oak, mister,
she grumbled. Bill nodded and slumped against the sofa. He looked a little dazed now that Hermione saw him, taking in the small details. He held his hand to his head as if he were feeling faint, and rubbed his left shoulder with his other hand. Molly noticed too.
Bill, are you all right?
She asked.
Fine, Mum, just feeling a bit weak.
Hermione stood up.
You look worse than before,
she said.
Here, let me take a look.
She took hold of his arm and tried to lift him back to the sofa.
I'm fine, Hermione, he repeated.
She kept trying to pull him up.
And you're not a healer, no offense. With the diadem, I have a photographic memory of my parents' physiology books. Well, the parts I read. Molly, can you show me a diagnostic charm? I need to see what I'm working with.
Molly let out an exasperated sigh and pointed her wand.
Manifestai!
A multicolored aura appeared around Bill's sbody, including a large red splotch on his abdomen. Molly gasped.
What happened? It wasn't like that last time I checked. What does that mean?
Hermione said.
I don't know. That's only a general diagnostic charm. I'm not a healer. Something like that we'd take him to St. Mungo's for. Which we can't do now. Damn,
Hermione muttered.
Bill, what is wrong?
Fleur asked. Just a little banged up is all, Bill tried to assure his wife.
Fleur, see for yourself, Hermione said. Let me take a look.
Bill started to protest, but she flicked her wand and ripped his shirt off. Her eyes widened when she saw a large purple splotch under his skin on his left side. Molly and Fleur gasped.
Oh, that's not good,
Hermione said.
Oh, that's not good,
Hermione said. She touched it, and Bill hissed in pain. The area was swollen and tender.
That's internal bleeding. Let me think.
She closed her eyes and concentrated, calling up part of the pathophysiology book she'd read. She'd covered a lot of the major organ systems, looking for possible curses.
Kerr's sign is characterized by a sharp pain at the tip of the left shoulder when the patient is lying down.
Her eyes snapped open.
Bill, lie down.
I can wait, Hermione. She pushed him down by his opposite shoulder.
Ow, ow, ow!
He cried, rubbing his left shoulder again, right at the tip.
Yes, that's a ruptured spleen, Hermione said. Okay. Symptoms of hemorrhagic shock.
She grabbed his wrist.
Pulse is weak, but steady. Heartbeat is 120. Behavior is...
Will you stop that? Bill pulled his arm away.
Combative. Extremities are cool and mottled. Class 2 internal hemorrhage. Class 2 internal hemorrhage. Borderline Class 3. Molly, how much of that blood replenishing potion can we spare?
What? Molly gasped.
Hermione? How much? Well, Fleur probably won't need it, but we won't know until the baby is born.
Leave it. Bill grunted as he gently touched his hand to his side. Leave it to Fleur. I can wait. Hermione shook her head vigorously.
Unless she's going to deliver that baby in the next hour, no, you can't.
Fleur screamed, followed by something that wasn't French and might have been Siberian, the Vila mother tongue.
Damn you and your plans, Hermione! I'm going to kill you!
No, Fleur, Bill cut her off. It's not her fault. She found a way in, that was all. I went along with it. And I was doing the planning, Ron added. And if it weren't for Hermione, we wouldn't have made it out at all, George added.
Everyone just shut up,
Hermione yelled, and they all stopped.
Bill needs that blood replenishing potion. Now.
She unstoppered the correct vial and measured out half the bottle.
No, he insisted, if Fleur needs it. You need it more, Bill. Besides, I can fix a postpartum hemorrhage easier than I can fix a ruptured spleen.
Molly stared at her.
You can?
She asked.
Yes, probably, 85%, which is better odds than Bill would have before you say anything, she snapped.
She forced him to drink the potion. Molly gasped.
Is it that bad? The internal bleeding is bad, and I'm still trying to figure out how to fix it with what we have here. Then you need to do something, Hermione, Fleur hissed. I need to think.
She turned to the wall and closed her eyes and covered her ears. She only knew a handful of healing spells, and not ones that would do much for internal injuries. She did know quite a bit of anatomy and physiology, and the photographic memory the diadem gave her was the best edge she could get, but it still wasn't promising.
I've bought some time. I just need a way to stop the bleeding, she muttered to herself. Seal the wound from the outside? No, it's no good. Maybe there are spells that do that, but with what I've got there's no way I could repair it without being able to see. Open him up? Even that I don't know much, and I don't know how it translates to organs. And I'm assuming he doesn't have a perforated bowel or something like that. But that's not an immediate problem. I can just raid a chemist for penicillin if his magic can't fight it off. Or cleaning the blood of impurities in situ? Tch! If I had a week. Take out the entire spleen? No, only as a last resort. Trying to play surgeon's an even worse idea. Just need a way to stop the bleeding.
Someone tapped her on the shoulder.
What?
She slapped the hand away so hard that she wound up backhanding a startled Harry across the face. "Sorry," he squeaked. "You're starting to talk in circles. Are you okay?"
I'll be fine, Harry.
Fleur screamed again, and Hermione recoiled from the sound, wedging herself in the corner. All the noise was taking its toll on her, making it that much harder to concentrate on the task at hand.
Active labor is defined by contractions closer than 5 minutes apart, and cervical dilation greater than 3 centimeters, and typically lasts 8 hours. No! Focus!
By her estimation, Fleur had been in active labor practically from the start. She didn't know offhand how fast it could go, but Fleur sounded like she was going for a record. Hermione was worried about Bill, though. In a perfect world, or a better one anyway, she'd only have to worry about keeping him alive long enough to get professional help. But here, no help was coming, and a ruptured spleen was bad news, especially as fast as it was progressing. After a few minutes, Hermione checked on Bill again. His vitals were better, but the bruising on his side was worse, and his breathing wasn't much easier.
How are you feeling, Bill? She said. And don't lie.
My legs kinda hurt, he admitted.
Your legs? How's that?
Not sure. My feet feel swollen. Hermione raised her eyebrows and quickly rolled up his trouser legs. Sure enough, his ankles were swollen.
Oedema, she said. Of course, fluid overload. Blood replenisher and internal bleeding don't mix well. Okay, this isn't going to resolve on its own. I'll have to operate.
Operate? Harry said.
Well, sort of. I need to drain that bleeding to relieve the pressure.
Is that what you're supposed to do?
Probably not, but I don't have much to work with here, and I need to go in to see if I can repair his spleen from the inside. Wait, you mean to cut him open? Molly said in horror. Like those muggle butchers?
Hermione saw red. She lunged at Molly before Harry and George ran in and stopped her. George tried to pull the diadem off her, and she slapped his hand away.
Those muggle butchers wiped the deadliest disease in the world off the face of the earth with no magic at all, she snarled. Don't you call them that again. Right now it's the only chance Bill has. Muriel, I need a bottle of the strongest spirits you've got. Stat. Stat? Muriel said. Stat him! Immediately! She barked. Saito, Saito, Saito!
Even Muriel Pruitt was cowed by Hermione's anger and ran to the kitchen to rummage through the cupboards. As soon as she was back in her line of sight, Hermione pointed her wand and summoned the bottle from her hands. She uncorked it and poured the liquor over her wand and the carpet over Muriel's objections.
A bowl! A bowl! No, 2 bowls, she ordered.
Muriel grabbed those 2, and Hermione poured the rest in one of them and splashed her fingers in it.
Harry, George, hold him down, Hermione ordered. Molly, shift Fleur over.
They made room for Bill on the floor, and the boys took their positions at Bill's head and feet and held him in place, George following Hermione's lead.
Do you even know what you're doing? He whispered.
Damn it, Harry! I'm an arithmancer, not a doctor. But I'm all we've got right now.
She placed her wand at the bottom of where the blood was pooling and cast a weak cutting charm to make a small incision. Bill hissed and jerked on the floor, but otherwise stayed steady.
"Oh, Bill!"
Molly sobbed.
"What is this?"
Fleur demanded.
"The Dark Ages?" "At this point I'm going with yes,"
Hermione said. Arthur chose that moment to speak up. "Molly, Fleur," he said, looking stern, "there's not much we can do when the enemy controls everything. If there's anything Hermione can do, even if it's out of our comfort zone, she should do it." They reluctantly accepted that. Some of the blood drained out, and Hermione cautiously cast a weak tergio to draw out more. She didn't want to risk making the bleeding worse, but she needed to at least partially clear the area. At least she hoped that was the right way to go about it. The purple area shrank and lightened, although it remained discolored. She used Episci to close that incision, since it was small enough, and then made a slightly larger incision directly above where the spleen should be.
"Need my other wand,"
she muttered. She pulled out her red oak wand, thankful that she still had both of them, soaked that one in alcohol too, and used it to hold the incision open just a little.
"Lumos!"
She couldn't see much, but she could see as she worked through the layers of tissue.
"Now, if the anatomy diagrams I remember are accurate, the spleen should be right."
"Yeah!" Bill yelled in pain.
"There! Now I just have to hope this works." "Vulnera senenta! Vulnera senenta! Vulnera senenta!" "Does it feel any better?"
Maybe a little," Bill grunted.
"I don't know what it's supposed to feel like." "Sorry, I don't want to risk cutting more. We'll have to see how it progresses. I just wish I knew healing spells specifically for this."
She could have cut the tension with a knife as they waited. She kept monitoring Bill and recoiled each time Fleur had a contraction. Bill held his wife's hand as much as he could. Time was a blur as it went on, although Fleur's labor was still going fast.
"Precipitous labor is defined as labor lasting less than 3 hours from the start of steady contractions to the expulsion of the fetus. Gad, stay on task, Hermione."
Bill's bleeding wasn't much better. Either the healing spell designed for clean slash wounds didn't work on crushed organs, or there were other problems she didn't know about. An hour later, she bit the bullet and insisted Bill drink the rest of the blood replenishing potion. But that still wasn't a permanent fix.
"Think harder!"
Fleur screamed.
"Be quiet!"
she yelled. She couldn't concentrate with all this noise.
"If there's any other way I can do it... No, this isn't working. Ah, reabsorption of the blood into the capillaries. That could work. Parchment, quills, self-inking."
Percy brought some, and Hermione started frantically writing out equations. It was a pain in the arse trying to do this on living tissue, but she knew just enough about healing spells to pull it off. When the potion started wearing off again, she cast
"Rescindo livor,"
and the discolored tissue improved further. But that still wasn't getting at the root problem.
"Body temperature's dropping. I need heat,"
she said. They draped a blanket over most of Bill's body, leaving enough space for her to continue working. His breathing was growing more labored, fast and deep. She didn't like the look of it.
"Structural changes," she muttered to herself. "Blood vessels are lined with smooth muscle. Way to knit the muscle fibers back together."
A loud scream intruded on her thoughts.
"All right, push, push!"
Molly yelled.
"Push already?"
This really was going to be a bit under 3 hours.
"That's it, Fleur. This is going to be quick, I can tell. Breathe."
Bill squeezed Fleur's hand.
"It's okay, love. I'm right here," he said.
Hermione turned away and covered her ears again. It was too much. She whined loudly and buried her head in the sofa, but it was still coming through. And suddenly it stopped. For a moment she thought she'd gone deaf. Then the sunburned feeling and the deep ache returned, and then she realized half the room was still screaming. She stood up. George was standing over her, holding the diadem in his hands. "I told you this thing isn't good for you," he said. "You look like you were about to faint."
"It's this environment," she said weakly. "Too much."
She was interrupted by a scream.
"Push, push!" Molly said. "Oh, I see her. She has your hair."
Fleur was babbling loudly in multiple languages so that Hermione couldn't begin to understand her. Molly was still shouting.
"That's it. One more push."
Hermione thought Fleur's final scream sounded more like the velociraptors from Jurassic Park than anything else, only much louder, longer, and scarier. But moments later she stopped and a higher-pitched wail pierced the air.
Yes, there she is,
Molly said. She was positively beaming as she handed the baby over to Fleur. She was small, but clearly had a healthy pair of lungs, and she already had a full head of silver hair like her mother.
Oh, hello, baby girl, Fleur breathed. Oh, Fleur, she's beautiful,
Bill said. He reached out to stroke the baby's head, then paused. His hand was covered in claw marks. Hermione pulled his hand back.
Tergio, Episci.
The bleeding stopped, and the wounds closed. At least that was fixable. He stroked the baby's head as Fleur laid her against her chest. Ginny was squealing excitedly as she watched, and Molly doted over them, checking the baby over. Hermione was seriously reconsidering whether she wanted to be a mother after watching that, but she was happy for them. In the meantime, she used Molly's diagnostic charm on Bill again and frowned. The blood loss wasn't as bad, but he looked worse overall. The stress of the birth probably hadn't helped his injuries, and the overall color of his aura was darker. His hands were trembling, and he was still short of breath.
"What name did you decide on?"
Arthur asked. Bill and Fleur looked at each other, then up at him.
"We didn't really—"
Bill started.
"Nadia," Fleur said firmly. "It means hope in Siberian. Nadia Wilhelmina Weasley."
"Please don't," Bill said.
"Of all the middle names to be saddled with." "See if you can stop me, Bill. I want her always to be close to her wonderful father."
Bill sighed heavily.
"Nadia,"
he agreed. Hermione leaned back and watched the new parents happily for a few minutes, but it soon became clear that something was wrong. Fleur quickly delivered the afterbirth, but immediately afterwards Molly was rubbing her stomach and she moaned in pain. There was too much blood. Molly looked at Hermione in panic.
"The bleeding isn't stopping," she said. "If you're right about being able to fix it—" "Damn it, you shouldn't have used that potion," Bill growled.
"Quiet, Bill," Hermione said.
"Molly, Hermione?"
Fleur said breathlessly. She sounded terrified.
"Fleur, I've got this,"
Hermione said. She pointed her wand.
"Manifestare. Molly, any tears?" "What? No, it doesn't look like it."
"Good." She positioned her wand and looked Fleur in the eye.
"I'm sorry, Fleur, but this is going to hurt. Titania!"
Fleur let out a loud squeal even higher pitched than Nadia's. Her legs and hips flailed, but a moment later Hermione cast a finite, and she fell still. Molly checked her over.
It stopped,"
she said in disbelief.
"I told you I could fix it."
"Wasn't that the curse Rookwood used on you?" George asked.
I reverse engineered it."
Most cases of postpartum hemorrhage were caused by a failure of the uterus to contract.
"Bloody hell,"
Bill said. "How could you use that on her?"
"The bleeding stopped, didn't it?"
Hermione snapped.
"It's like fixing your telly by kicking it, but it'll work in a pinch."
Fleur took a deep breath and closed her eyes, relaxing with Nadia still on her chest. "Thank you, Hermione," she said.
"Yes, thank you," Bill agreed. "I'm sorry I doubted you." "Don't thank me yet," Hermione muttered under her breath. "George, the diadem, please."
Her boyfriend sighed, but he handed the diadem back to her and she placed it on her head. She immediately went back to evaluating Bill, taking in every detail. He was taking fast and deep breaths. That meant acidosis, didn't it? She remembered from when she was thinking it through earlier. His body temperature was still low, and the bleeding still didn't seem to be slowing.
Come on, think of it."
She thought back to what she knew of blood vessel structure. She didn't actually know how smooth muscle tissue was assembled.
"Damn it, collocalia?"
It was crude as hell. It would only work with collagen as designed, but it just might knit the ruptured blood vessels back together. It would also probably create some nasty scar tissue that would never heal properly, but it was better than bleeding to death. But ultimately it didn't seem to be doing much to stem the bleeding. She tried to think of something else, but she didn't really even know what the problem was. A completely shattered spleen might just not mend with the spells she had at her disposal. It took only a few minutes for her to recognize that his other symptoms weren't improving either. His breathing was rapid, his pulse weak, and he couldn't stay warm. Suddenly she made the connection.
"Oh no," Hermione breathed. "No, no, 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 no." What is it?" Molly gasped. I can't get ahead of this. He needs help." "Ahead of what?" "Poor heart function, acidosis, and hypothermia. It's the triad of death."
Gasps circled the room. Molly squealed in fear. Fleur instinctively cradled Nadia closer to his chest as if to shield her from the horror. The what?" Bill said shakily. "I've never heard of that curse."
"Ah, it's not a curse. Muggle doctors have discovered that those three problems feed into each other and cause the body to fail rapidly."
Hermione looked up very seriously at Molly and Arthur.
"He can't stay here," she said. "Not with the shape he's in."
"There's nowhere we can take him," Arthur insisted.
"Arthur, he's going to die if he doesn't get professional help. He can't stay here."
Arthur turned white, but said, Madame Pomfrey was the only real healer for the Order, and we can't contact her safely. Even if we could get someone else, they wouldn't have the potions he needs."
"Then we'll have to risk St. Mungo's."
"We'd never get out of there alive. The Death Eaters won't hold back."
"Hospital in France?"
"After last time," Harry spoke up, "you know they'll be watching the shortest route. Maybe Muggle trains by now, too."
"Damn it, damn it, damn it!" "Bill!"
Fleur cried. Bill shook his head. "I'm sorry, Fleur," he whispered.
"There must be something."
"What about a Muggle hospital?" Everyone stopped and turned to Harry in disbelief. He shrugged. "Well, if it's not a curse wound, they can probably help him," he explained.
"Of course! Harry, that's brilliant!" Hermione exclaimed. "A Muggle hospital?" Molly gasped. "You can't be serious!" "Do you want me to try to cut him open and take out his spleen myself?" she demanded. "Because that's the only other thing I can do here that's not just buying time. A Muggle hospital is his only hope."